Okay, there we go. This program keeps, for some reason, switching microphones, switching inputs on me. So, okay. I can't tell if I'm clipping there. I'm in the yellow. I think that's probably good. I don't want to go too low. Just let me know if this sound gets bad. Okay. There's also a slightly longer delay than usual. I set the settings to it buffers it a little bit more so that the stream is a higher quality. I'm hoping that, I don't know if there's any issues with audio in particular so that you can hear everything clearly. Yeah, I just thought I'd go ahead and post it. You can, or put it out there that you can start posting questions, and I'll try to get to those here in a minute. It's been just a fun week for me in terms of practicing and trying to really get down my my piano skills. If you were here last week, you remember I was talking about G flat major and how I've been trying to really master that and try to get it under my fingers. And the reason is because I'm kind of systematically going through the things that I fear and the things that cost me a lot of stress while composing, and dealing with really messy, ugly key signatures like G flat is one of those things. And hold on, I'll fix my pedal here. There we go. So one of the things that I've been really trying to force myself is to, as my first default for the week, instead of going to something that I know and am really comfortable with, right? C major or F major, or D major, A major, any of these kind of easier keys, I was trying to really force myself to go with the more difficult, things that I would normally stay away from when I'm noodling around on the piano. And I think it's been good. I've been trying to think about things in the key of G flat, or sorry, C flat. No, G flat. I was just about to go to a C flat chord. And so I guess what I'm getting to is that it's been really worth it spending the time to dive into an area that I'm really uncomfortable with. So what I did this week with that is I composed several pieces, and I'll see, maybe I can pull them up. Nabil, I do see your question about checking out your first movement to your sonata. Go ahead and email it to me. Oh, you said you emailed it already. Okay. So let me go ahead and pull up one of these pieces that I wrote this week. Give me a second here. Let's see. Where did I put that? No, I think I need the little checker thing to show me where I can't remember the folder I put it. Okay, Sibelius sounds. Okay, well, I'm getting that loaded up. Let me go ahead and jump to a question so everybody's not just staring at me finding stuff on the computer. Let's see, I'm currently composing a string quartet in elegy, but I'm getting too stuck with melodic lines. What would you recommend to me? Well, that's kind of an open question. It's hard to say specifically. If you want, you can email me whatever you have right now. I prefer, if you've got a Sibelius file, Sibelius. If you have a music XML file, or if you can export music XML, that's also preferred. That way I can open it up in Sibelius. I think that'll allow us to answer that question a little bit better, because I'm not exactly sure what you mean by stuck with melodic lines. So, okay, let me get back to Sibelius and see where, you know what? I don't know where I put that piece. Okay. Well, maybe I'll get back to that, because it's been a fun week, right? Getting this stuff down under my fingers. There we go. Okay, let me look at what Nabil sent. Music XML file. I'll open it up in Sibelius. Okay, let's go to this window here. And here we go. Okay, as usual, like when I'm opening up music XML files, there may be an issue with the formatting, or with maybe you have hidden objects like pedal markings or something, and it shows up here. It's not a perfect import, so I won't make too many comments about formatting or anything like that. So let's go ahead and listen. I'm going to skip the repeat here, so we'll just continue. Nabil, bravo! Oh my goodness, yeah, that was really, really great. Okay, so I mean, I don't know what you expect to critique about this right now. It's quite a lengthy piece. I think you're doing really, really well, really phenomenal. I mean, you've got everything in here that you really should have in a classical sonata form piece. I feel like you just really internalized all the techniques and all the ideas. I can hear clear corollaries to what Beethoven does here. I mean, when I see anything like this, right, it makes me think of the piano sonata number 9 in E major, right? Beautiful sound. I've always loved that piano sonata. I'm trying to think what else, just very, very great writing. I really enjoyed it. The one thing that I would say is probably, I don't know how much time you've spent proofing it and checking parts for playability and refining and removing things. You're at such a great point in this composition that you need to go through very carefully, and you may have already done this. I don't know. You may have already taken the time to check all the parts and made sure it's playable. And if you can play this, that's also phenomenal, because that's an incredible skill for a composer to be able to write a complex piece like this and then be able to perform it for people. That's, if you want to get your music performed, talk about a great way to do it. It's just play your own music. So, if you're not comfortable with the piano in that way, like maybe that it's playable, but you're unable to really perform this in the way you'd like it to be performed, you're at the point where you should probably find a great pianist that in your local area that you can get this to and start working on it with them to make a really fine-tuned playable version, because a really competent pianist can come along and say, I get what you're trying to do here, I get what you're trying to do there, but here's another way to get the same effect, maybe. Because like certain areas over here, let's measure 62. I guess that's not too hard. Just got to be practiced, right? Yeah, I guess that's a pretty good feel in the hand. So, and that's basically all I do when I'm going through to check for playability, is I go through it really slowly, because if you can play really slowly, you can more than likely play it quickly with a lot of practice, right? So this is all, right, all pretty straightforward stuff. So, but yeah, well done, really great. I mean, is there anything that you want to comment on here about the piece? Anything in particular that you're concerned with or worried about, or you're not sure how to handle? It's a, yeah, you did a great job. So. Let's see. Okay, Nabil said he can play slowly. So that's great. How can I bring the harmony to the next level? Okay. Well, I think it's not necessarily clear what next level harmony means. I mean, you've got a pretty good grasp on functional harmony, right? And traditional modulation. Now, you do some interesting choices here in terms of where things go. Like, for instance, right here. Right? I think that is it's a really interesting section, but I would be just cautious to make sure that you understand exactly what you did there, because sometimes I'll write stuff, and it's totally okay to do this. I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. This is actually where a lot of the great discoveries of your own personal voice and taste happen. But just going through and making sure that you can figure out what it is that's going on here, So you got a C sharp major chord in first inversion. Then you've got F sharp minor. Probably should write this. C sharp major over E sharp, right? F sharp minor. Then we've got... Is that right? So you got a D sharp 7 chord here, or it's not. See, so here, this is not, you wouldn't have this, right? It should be. I'll just put a D sharp 7. It's not changing that note for some reason. Then we've got, so then you start doing some of these passing little diminished chords. Then you got a G sharp minor. I suppose I should put F diminished. And then you land right here. So that's a really cool move there. It's a C in first inversion. Sorry. Getting notifications here. Let's see. So either way, you've got some really kind of interesting harmonic movement here, right? But you want to make sure that you know what's actually going on. And I would say spend some time to do some analysis, right? Because that's that movement that you make right there. Oh, sorry. Cool sounds, but you just got to know your piece and know, you know, what it is that you were trying to accomplish, maybe what was different from what you initially set out to do, and then try to take that and, you know, reutilize that in a different way. So in terms of other stuff, though, like once you get a grasp of exactly what you've done harmonically, right, it may be that you really like this G sharp minor going to, you know, C in first inversion. And you want to find locations within your piece to redo little parts of the harmony and create more unification across the piece. So that's something that I'll do when I get to the end of a piece. You know, what you wrote at the beginning is fine and everything, but you don't always have to keep it exactly as it is. Just because that was the start of the piece, you know, it doesn't mean it needs to be how it begins, right? So look for the things that you really love about your piece, the stuff that sticks out to your ear. And in a sense, it's always the thing that you're like waiting to get to in the piece, you know? It's that part of the symphony or that part of the sonata where it just, for some reason, you get tingles. What is it about that moment? Can you reuse that moment earlier in the piece, or can you allude to that moment maybe without, you know, totally repeating it? There's lots of ways to use that in unique different ways. Another way you could do it is just, you know, more simple chromatic harmony with applied dominance, and applying further back. I mean, you can apply. You've got 2, 5, 1, right? That's kind of your typical cadence. 1, 2, 5, 1. So everybody knows that you can do an applied dominant, but you can also just do an applied 2, 5, 1, right? So I could be in this key right here. I can move to a B minor or B minor 7, and it feels like, oh, that's kind of a strange movement. Until that is, I play a 5 chord, right? And then a 1 chord. And then now it feels like we've gone back in. But I didn't, you know, going to B minor 7 from C major, it's not an applied anything of anything here. I suppose you could say it's kind of applied to E minor in a modal way or something. But so yeah, thinking kind of backwards from where your goal is, just picking a harmony that maybe you feel is a little bit bland, and saying, I'm going to add some applied chords leading up to this moment so that you can change up your harmony in a very functional, natural way without having to lose control. Another thing that I like to do is often you can keep the same bass note and change the overall feel, but still accomplish the same kind of functional move. I'm writing this piece right now. I want to redo the free course, and I want to write a piece of music that I explain very clearly and quickly all the tools that you learn in the free course, and it's just simple. It's right. It's 1 and 4, 5. They're not incredibly complex harmonies, but a little bit later on, I do a cadence. Right, I could do that. I actually kind of wanted to take it to B major and then do a deceptive cadence, kind of cool stuff with the harmony. So what I ended up doing was trying to mix them, right? And I'm going to talk about this in the free course because I think being able to play around with your music is a good skill. I hit that A, and then my D is in first inversion instead of, which is, it just feels like we're just obviously going to that G. So, and then I hit the B chord, right? But I put the G on the bottom. It's got a weird, cool sound. But because they both want to go there, right? That is a deceptive cadence. And the G, so what that's called is an upper structure triad. And actually, I'll switch to this view real quick so you can see. I'm playing a B major chord over a G bass. Right? I love upper structure triads because you can basically think of this lower note working the way pedals work. Not piano pedals, but pedal harmony, right? So pedal harmony allows you to keep the same bass note, but move around. It's a great way to keep things moving without losing the tonic, I can't think of the term, but the tonic progression that you're prolonging. There we go. The prolongation progression that you're creating, right? You could just hold a G chord here when I'm playing, which is obviously kind of boring. Or you could do all these harmonies over a pedal. Well, what's really cool about a pedal is that it's so strong harmonically, right? You can basically do anything over it. It always feels like it wants to go back to 1. I can literally play anything. And then as long as I bring it back to 1, it's going to sound good, right? So that's what pedal harmony is, and it's just a cool tool to use. So both of those you could try out. Find a spot where you want to just spice it up, right? Let me switch views. But let me also say here that a part of the problem with trying to spice up the harmony in this piece is that it's clearly in a classical style. And as soon as you start to add non-classical harmony, that's, once again, perfectly fine. I do that all the time. But you're going to start to get a sound that is going to raise some eyebrows, right? People will not be expecting. You'll be breaking expectations. So it could be that you want to let them in cautiously and carefully, right? You don't necessarily want to put all your harmonic flashiness into the first playing through of the exposition, which is why as you get later on into the Romantic period and early 20th century, repeats tend to be written out, so you don't have to play through exactly the way you played it the first time. You want to bring material back, right? But you want to bring it in a natural way, and the way things are naturally, they tend to change a little bit over time. So written out repeats are more common the later you get. So that's something that you could do here is you don't necessarily want to just repeat. You could write out your repeat and add some of those little changes as you go. And then when you get to the recapitulation, throw it all in there and really, go all out for that. Try to give people something to remember. Okay. So, and then, Pavi made a comment here. He said, I often think music could generally benefit from some simplification. That's a good point. Often our first instinct is to show off, especially for other composers, right? We want other composers to know how amazing we are at harmony. So what do? We throw in everything in the kitchen sink, and we end up with a piece that really is maybe interesting to a few composers, but your average person is probably not going to listen to it. So yeah, really well done, Nabil. I think, get that in the hands of a really good pianist and get that thing recorded. I think you owe it to yourself to have a victory here. There's something special about real people playing your music, especially when it's not you. There's something really special about that. Like you're actually doing what it is that you set out to do at the beginning, which was I'm going to learn to compose so that I can write music so that people can actually listen to it, right? So yeah, get that in the hands of a pianist. Okay, let's see. Let me real quick while I'm talking about it. And unfortunately, I don't have this put into Sibelius yet. I've only got it written by hand. Here's my sketch paper. And you can see I've got to deal with kids running in and scribbling all over my sketches constantly. So there's a big O and a B that my son's just learning to write letters. And so it's all good. It's just funny to come back and try to read this stuff. Okay, I'm going to play for you this piece that I'm working on. This is not necessarily how the everything's going to go, but because I'm talking a little bit about pedal harmony, I just want to play through it at least once. And this will be what the new free course is going to focus on is going through this specific piece, and I'm going to go through bit by bit the way I normally do, and really explain and discuss and show how I went composing this. Okay, so let me go ahead and play it. It's kind of low. Now you can hear I'm using that pedal harmony. If I were to take that out, it would sound pretty different, I think. All these things. I may take out that little, because I kind of like the, I think it's a stronger cadence there anyway. So here I go back to, I do a different pedal harmony. Now I'm on G. And this is kind of low, actually, I think. All right, so that's an A minor above that G. I go to E flat here. And then A. What do I do here? Then what I was thinking is, once again, pedal harmony, because I don't know why I'm obsessed with it right now. So I wanted to create a little piece that was kind of simple and pretty, but explains a lot of the things I'm trying to teach. I'll probably take out some of those pedals now that I look at how many pedals I've got in there, in fact, pedal tones. So, okay, let me go ahead and open up this other one. This is by Gustavo. And I'll close Nabil's. Okay. Okay, we'll look at it like this. Let's go ahead and listen to Gustavo's. Okay, thanks for sending that over. Let me go ahead and get back onto the screen here. So let's see. Let me look at what you actually wrote in your question. I sent you a small composition. I usually take a lot of time to compose, but following the sonata form, I managed to finish it in an afternoon. Any suggestions regarding the form? What can I do to improve the left-hand patterns? Thank you. Okay. So I believe that is this composition. I would say that you've got some really cool ideas in here, and this reminds me of Wagner. Which one is it? It's the one of the overtures. Is it, you know, let's see. Let me see if I can find this real quick. I don't know if you've been listening to Wagner, if that's an inspiration for you or what, but let's see. I don't know if it's the Meistersingers. No. Maybe it is this one. No, I don't think that one's it. Hold on. You know, it's the maybe that's Tannhauser. Sorry, if it's not this one, I'm going to give it up. Here we go. That part always reminds me of, you know, Sound of Music. Okay, so I think you get it. Yes, Tannhauser. I think probably it'd be a good idea to sit down and listen to that to see how he handles it, because he's using very similar kinds of movements. You know, da 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 da. Right? You've got these kind of cool triplety things that you do, where you do a triplet and then a leap into the harmony on an offbeat, right? On a weak beat. Man, everybody's giving me difficult key signatures today. Maybe I should have not opened my mouth last week, right? And you've got, you know, kind of cool harmonies going on here. These feel like applied seventh chords and stuff all over the place. I mean, just looking at it, you can see all the accidentals. So I would start with, yes, listen to a great piece of music that has a similar feel to see what it is that feels different about the two pieces. Get the score, try to analyze it. And one of the better ways to get an idea of the form is to get the vocal score on these, you know, opera pieces and look at the piano. Or if it's a symphony, just get a solo piano version of the symphony, because that allows you to look at the form in a much simpler way without having to, you know, look at an entire score page to try to get it down. Now, in terms of specifics to this piece, I would say that you're falling into the trap of just being seduced by cool harmony, right? And I love great harmony just as much as the next composer. I think we all love great harmony, right? It's really cool. But you can't let it overshadow the overall design. And I think probably what you could do is, if you were to zoom out, right? And I don't know what program you're using, if you're using Sibelius or what, or if you're just on paper, you know, if you print it out and work on paper. But actually go through here and mark up the chunks as clearly as you can. So like, here's a basic idea. Here's a presentation phrase. Here's a continuation phrase. Here's a exposition or transition, and bigger, right? Or start big and kind of move your way small. It's the same thing as what I was doing earlier when I was talking about analyzing your own harmony to understand what you did. It's a good time for you to sit back and analyze your own form, and try to do it not from the standpoint of when you were composing it, right? Because you got ideas, right? We have a theme. You know, I don't know if it was right here. I think maybe it was a little bit later on, where you had a very clear rendition of the theme for a while. Maybe it was right there. Okay, so that feels to me like a very clear statement of a presentation phrase. You've got a basic idea and a repetition of a basic idea, right? So you can pull that out as a usable chunk, and you could put it somewhere else. You could put it at the beginning. You could do whatever with it. And what you need to do is locate those kind of things. There's stuff in here. This feels like a continuation. So if I were to, let's see. Which this results into a kind of a weird chord, kind of a deceptive cadence, but just messing around, right? If I were to add 4 measures here, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this without having to do a whole bunch of other stuff, but number of bars. Okay. So I'm going to option, click that, and I'm going to go. I don't know if this is going to work. I'm literally just cutting and pasting, but let's see what this feels like. And then I feel like it's just crying out for, right, somewhere along there. But you can see how this section feels like a continuation to me. You've got fragmented ideas. You've got increasing harmonic rhythm. You've got these chord changes every beat, right? You've got a downward slope going to this tonic, just inevitably going to happen. Whereas this, it's repetitive in terms of you've got an idea, then you repeat the idea. It feels like a presentation phrase. So just that little action right there, sitting back and then taking the time to rework it so that it goes really well from the first section to the next, you could rethink the logic of your piece, and I think it'll make a little bit more sense to your ears. So yeah, that's my biggest recommendation is once you write something, once again, your piece has no control over you. You control your piece completely. So if you feel like something's not making sense, cut it up, right? Move stuff around, erase ideas, recompose ideas. You got to get messy with it in order to really get to the good stuff. That piece that I just played a little while ago, really simple, but I actually went through a lot of changes before I got to that point. And even with a short little, simple piece like this, kind of in small ternary form. Okay, let me jump back, make sure I got no other emails so far. Okay, let me jump up here, make sure I haven't missed any questions. Oh, let me say one last thing, because you did ask about improving the left hand patterns, right? Silence is a very powerful weapon. And I hear, by the way, if you hear little kids screaming outside of the door, they're just running around chasing each other. So, yeah, the silence is really, it can be shocking to a listener, especially when you're expecting. Well, let me just play this right here. And right, that built a lot of tension right there. Emotionally, I was having trouble with that. I was like, I just got to hit this note, right? So anytime that you place a rest like this and you're chopping up this left hand rhythm, oh, sorry, playing that wrong. Anytime you do that, you're really breaking up the flow of the music, and I would say that just use it carefully. You want to really think about when you're giving moments of silence, when you're going all out, when you've got continuity. Right here, once again, as an opening idea, I got to really tape my pedal to the ground because it keeps moving. Right? That's a really great melody there. I think it's so simple. But I would hear whatever you want to do harmonically, right? And don't be afraid to do a 7 oh, actually this is a sharp 7. But yeah, I think probably here you'd want to add a little bit more. Let's see. Maybe just. Maybe that's too strong in those octaves right there. However you want to do it. I just think not giving so many choppy things right at the beginning is probably a good idea. You want to get people settled in. And then maybe you could start to do the more fragmented stuff as you move on a little bit into the piece, especially once you get to the the continuation, because that could be fragmented, right? Fragmentation is one of the tools that we use in continuations to make them feel like they're gaining momentum. Okay, let me jump back and look for some more questions. Okay. I have to write a Baroque concerto for harpsichord. I would like to know about Bach concertos for keyboard. My problem is about the form. How is it composed? Exposition, coda. Okay, so I'm going to start off by saying that I'm not an expert on Baroque, concerto forms or ritornello forms. What we have in classical form is similar to, but not exactly the same. And I would say there's a really good book, and it's called Bach and the Patterns of Invention. And he lays out in that book, I can't remember the author's name, Bach and the Patterns of Invention. Let me find it. Okay, here's the, I'll try to post a link here. I'm going to post that as well in the notes for this one. Okay, yeah, so in it, the author, who is, what was his name again? Lawrence Dreyfus. He has some really great points to make about the way Bach composed, and he, I would highly recommend reading the article on inventions and how Bach was going about actually writing inventions. And he also kind of has a bone to pick with Schenkerian theory, which if you've never studied Schenkerian theory, every time I get the urge, I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. I sit down to do it. I'm like, this isn't really helping me as a composer. You'd think it would, because it shows you these awesome little charts with the lines going down. It seems like it clears stuff up, but it doesn't feel how you actually go about composing. So this book, Bach and the Patterns of Invention, has another chapter on, it's called The Ideal Ritornello, and it talks about how Bach went about composing concertos and what he was trying to do with those concertos. And it's been a while since I read the book, and I wasn't reading specifically for that chapter, so I don't remember everything that he said about it. But don't necessarily think of Baroque form in the same way that you think of classical form, because they don't tend to operate in the same way. They often have very different goals. They have very different techniques that are being applied to them, and often something that would seem like it's just, it's only used in a certain section in classical form. Like, let's say you've got a lengthy sequence, right? Right, something like that, and you may only find that in a transition, or in I suppose you can find them anywhere in classical music, but you may get that used in a slightly different way in the Baroque era and repeated frequently, whereas maybe you wouldn't see it repeated in classical music as much. But that's definitely the book to look at. I think he lays it out pretty clear. Let me see what other questions. Personally, let me just back up. If I was doing it, I would start off with a relatively simple idea that you can get your head wrapped around, that focuses on 1 and 5 at first, right? Right, that kind of sound where you're harmonically going to simple places. Often in Baroque music, they want to just present it very clearly right at the beginning, right? One, 2, 5, 1, right? Other things that aren't as necessarily, they're not treated the same way as how cadences happen, how grand a cadence is. They often don't do these big slowdowns like you find in the classical romantic era, trying to really squeeze every last drop, really more romantic for that. Often you won't see any pausing of anything at all at a cadence. It'll just be right, and then there's elision at that moment, so the cadence lands, the one chord lands at the beginning of the next phrase. That's called elision, and you'll see that frequently with Bach and with Baroque music. Nothing beats opening up the scores and listening. And I would say before you do anything else, grab all the Brandenburg concertos, right? Which is not necessarily a form. Again, it's kind of like an idea. It's like all these people are going to be playing solo against all these people who are not going to be playing solo. Or this person or these people. Concerto grosso is when you have multiple soloists. Look at other concertos from the from the time. Let's see. Do you sometimes listen to the greats like Wagner here, but also Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, and think, how the hell did they do this? I guess who would? Looking at somebody like Bach, the amount of material that he put out, the speed that he put it out, the precision that he put out his music, I think that's fair to sit back and wonder, how is it that they did this? But never, ever forget that they're human. They're really no different from you and me. They just happen to have maybe a set of life experiences and a set of aptitudes and a set of desires and a set of people in their life that allowed it to their life to happen in the way that it did, right? Mozart is Mozart, and nobody can ever take that away from him. He was an incredible composer, incredible mind, incredible performer. But he also happened to be born with one of the greatest music teachers in all of Europe, who wanted his son to be a world-famous performer, as a child, and took him on long, arduous tours where he got to meet all the greatest composers of the day, learn to play their music, probably memorize it all, took counterpoint lessons, could play the violin, the viola, whatever keyboard instruments he had at the time. So, in a sense, it's kind of the luck of the draw. You weren't born Mozart, but also he died at like 30, and I'm sure life was pretty hard back then. So it's not necessarily a horrible thing. But yes, wonder, and then wonder deeper than just, I wonder how they did that, right? Sit back and say, what is it that they were doing? What is it that actually is going on in their lives to make them do what they're doing here? They're almost all of them are really competent at the piano and learning how to play. They could all improvise. Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, great composers knew how to accompany people with just figured bass. And it's not only in Bach's time that they use that. Debussy and Ravel had to learn how to play figured bass. I think I talked about it last week, but Émile Durand's accompaniment book I've been going through little by little, where you're just doing simple harmonic exercises at first, but eventually it leads to really cool progressions that you're expected to memorize and to be able to play through any key. And in doing that, internalizing that kind of stuff makes composing much, much faster. So, yeah. Let me see. Fiona said, I love that idea of analyzing your own form. I try to do that with my choral compositions to see how I'm developing the piece, since I usually do it by ear first and go back to be more intentional. Yeah. Composition is constantly going back and forth between gut instinct composing, using your ear and listening and figuring out where does that note want to go. I can use my brain and know that that's easy, right? That one wants to go back to 1. But then I can also just mess around with things, right? That felt good. That's an A flat 9 chord right there. And I didn't think about that theoretically. I just was saying, I wonder where can my fingers go to resolve really nicely. That's another one right there. Now I'm moving my fingers around, right? I'm just messing with things one little bit at a time, and that's a great way to compose. It's kind of like, by your gut composing. What am I doing here? I don't know. I have to look at it and then figure it out. Oh, I've got kind of a fourthy chord down here, D, G, C. And then up here, I've got a B major chord, but it's in second inversion. And that's a cool sound. May not sound as cool down here. I think it still sounds pretty cool, a little bit muddier. The point is that you can discover stuff by accident. You can discover stuff by thinking through it, by coming up with some random theoretical concept. I'm going to have everything. This is something I tried once, and it's kind of a mental exercise to do, but I had everything moving parallel or in functional movement, but regardless of what the other hand was doing. So here is C, one hand goes to D, one goes to B flat, right? The B flat has to go to E flat, right? And the D has to go to G. Kind of ugly. I don't know. Hey, Robert, I see your comment there. Hello. But coming up with random things like that is kind of fun, right? You never know what little system you're going to create for yourself that you can latch on to and use in a real composition. And, it took the first person to say, oh, I wonder if I can just hold a note and play whatever in my right hand. Oh, that works, right? Whoever that first person was to do pedal tones. That was just some system that somebody mentally came up with, in the moment, or messing around at the piano. And just like them, you could sit down and you can come up with your own ideas about how to do this. I'm only going to be using, flats and sharps. I don't know, whatever. Let's see. Eraton says, I have a lot of trouble with adding silence to my pieces. I can't seem to get it down. Well, it's pretty easy. You just erase things in it. So no. Yeah, silence, like anything else, has to be treated as a separate musical element. And just being conscious of when you're using silence and when you're not using silence. The more I get into this, the more I realize how critical it is for a composer to be competent on the piano. And the reason is because the piano gives you the ability to instantly experiment through improvisation with complex harmony, and you can basically orchestrate at the piano in a rough way. And having the ability to practice silence in your music is a cool thing that you can do on the spot with the piano. Why don't I put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to do this in G flat, right? And some people are going to be saying, you're cheating, you're doing it in F sharp. But that's not true. I'm actually thinking G flat, C flat, D flat, G flat, right? So there we go. I didn't cheat. But, right? I'm starting very soft. And I'm going really simple, but I'm practicing when does it feel like I'm putting in correct, good types of silence, and when does it feel like I'm putting in, maybe excessive silence. Where's that chord? The point is, and not that this is supposed to be some beautiful thing that I'm doing, the point is that you can experiment if you're having trouble with one specific element of your composing, like when to put in silence, experiment with it. Take an idea take a piece that you've already written, put it down at the piano, and now mess around with, say, I'm going to try a little bit of silence here, a little bit of silence there. Obviously, you can do that in Sibelius, but it's a lot quicker to just play it. You don't have to write things down, and sometimes writing takes forever. And on these little nitpicky things that you want to just try out for a second, it's just so much quicker to sit down at the piano and try it that way. Let's see. Polsky's asking, do you think Rossini is underrated? I don't know. I don't know what Rossini's rating is. So I can't tell you if it's under or over. But I love Rossini. I mean, I don't know who wouldn't love Rossini. It's just fun music, right? Let's see. Do you have any book suggestions about non-classical harmony, but not jazz and modes? Yeah, well, you've got the Vincent Persichetti 20th Century Harmony book, and there's just a lot of really cool stuff that you can get into there. He's got things on, he starts off with chords based off of, or sounds based off of intervals, and he goes through and he talks about how intervals are used by composers and how certain things can sound dissonant in certain situations and consonant in other situations. And then from there, he talks about other kinds of chords, obviously triads and seventh chords and chords built off of fourths and, upper structure triads and, bitonality, mixing two types of scales or two types of tonality together. I mean, there's a lot of different systems. There's like the jazz way of playing modal stuff, right? This kind of... I'm not quite there in my piano performance yet, so I'll leave it at that. But there's other ways of using modes that are non-jazz oriented. I mean, obviously, you've got the traditional church modes that are used with old counterpoint. That's Dorian, right? But you're not necessarily thinking about it as Dorian like jazz. It's being used in an entirely different way. But yeah, the Persichetti book is probably the one that you want to take a look at. Oh, good idea. Link. It's called 20th Century Harmony. Okay, here we go. Here's the link. I'll put that down here. Okay. I'll put that in the notes here. Bach and the patterns of invention. Okay, so let's see one more question here, and I'll see if there's no other compositions. So, can you tell the difference between jazz composition and classical composition apart from the heavy use of seventh chords? Well, with every style of composition, there's going to be telltale signs of what makes it that style. Right? So if you're talking about traditional jazz composition, I mean, the instrumentation is going to be pretty straightforward. Most of the time, you're going to be using normal jazz instruments, so things like piano, bass, drums, and wind instruments like saxes and trumpets and trombones. You do obviously have all sorts of other instruments used, flutes and clarinets and tuba, and I've been listening a ton to Gil Evans, and I would say Gil Evans is probably the closest to a real major crossover between big band, jazz, small group writing, and classical orchestral and chamber writing. Like he's almost seated perfectly in the middle. More so to me than somebody like Gershwin or Bernstein, who I look at more as actually just classical composers who really knew their jazz well, could perform the jazz, but weren't really trying to write jazz music like, dance band, big band kind of music. Gil Evans was like right there in the middle, and his stuff that he did with Miles Davis is just really amazing. If you haven't listened to Miles Ahead, you need to sit down and listen to Miles Ahead. And if you want a really good side-by-side, listen to Sketches of Spain and listen to the Adagio from Concerto de Aranjuez by Rodrigo, because he arranges that piece. He also arranges the Maids of Cadiz and Miles Ahead. Those albums are really amazing writing. Now, in terms of the actual like nitty-gritty of writing jazz, I mean, obviously, jazz harmony tends to be a little bit freer than what we would traditionally look at as classical harmony, although jazz harmony really relies on traditional classical rules. They just feel more comfortable bending those rules in different ways. So, you get 2-5-1s all over the place in jazz, right? but with classical composition, right? It's just a cadence. That's all it is. So those are the same kinds of tools. Obviously, with jazz, you feel more comfortable leaving unresolved sevenths, right? In classical style, and I'm not necessarily talking about early 20th century, but you want to normally resolve those unresolved tension notes. And form is usually a little bit different as well. I am coming up to a hard deadline here with time. I see my son just walked in. But let me say this real quick. I have completely upgraded the Academy, and it is technically live right now, although I plan on doing a bigger launch. The prices have dropped as well. So if you want to check it out, you can go to courses.artofcomposing.com. Now, if you're a currently subscribing member, I am doing a pricing drop, but it is in conjunction with I'm going to be setting up to do these live guided semesters here starting. I'm going to be starting it with the school year, so kind of mid-August probably, and there'll be more to come on this in an email soon. And the guided semesters are going to be me sitting down, going through the courses with you, each video along the way. So basically, we'll all have certain videos that we need to watch at the beginning of the week, and at the end of the week, we're going to do group lessons, and I'm going to be looking at everybody's exercises and compositions and that, and we're going to be, I haven't exactly landed on the technical system I'm using, but I'm either looking at something like GoToWebinar so that I can actually get on and video chat with you, or something like Discord. Discord it's like a group chat server thing that people use for gaming, but in terms of what we want to do, it could be really good because we could get into a chat room, we could talk about it. I could play stuff just like I do here, but we can all talk freely. So yeah, check it out, courses.artofcomposing.com, and it's going to be a little bit messy on the site, going back and forth to the old courses and the new courses until I can transition everybody over. So if you're interested in learning to compose, I think the guided semesters are going to be really useful for everybody. I have been really taking the time to get back to basics, get back to the core skills of what I need as a composer. And often it's not the really fancy stuff. It's not the really advanced technique that you find in some really cool score. That stuff is all great. But we can all do better to really reconnect with the core skills, understanding how functional harmony works and how to modify it, understanding how to create melodies that sound logical, how to create a melody that sounds like the notes are actually going somewhere where they need to go and it's not this, right? I see a lot of those kind of skippy, confusing melodies from beginners, and learning the techniques that I teach in the course really can get you out of those types of difficulties that beginner composers have. So yeah, check it out, courses.artofcomposing.com. There's links here in the notes, and I will see everybody next week in the symposium, and be on the lookout for emails from me. So until next time, yes, go listen to Gil Evans' Miles Ahead too. I can't get enough of it right now. It's just so amazing. The music, the harmonies, everything about it is really cool. So until next time, where's my camera? Talk to you later. Bye.